Last week, musician FKA Twigs sued her ex-boyfriend, actor Shia LaBeouf, whose first Google suggestion is, has STDs.
Is it?
Yes.
Now.
For sexual battery, assault, and infliction of emotional distress.
The big groan, the big sigh.
Welcome to Keep It, Cricket Media's show about pop culture and politics and what happens when they smack into each other at an alarming speed. I'm your host, Ira Madison III. I'm a television writer and Fall Out Boy fan.
I'm Louis Fertel. I'm a TV writer and Jane Fonda historian.
And I'm Aida Osman. I'm a TV writer and alleged comedian.
Let's get into it.
This was honestly not shocking, considering what we have seen from Shia LaBeouf since Even Stevens.
Since Holes.
He never got
He's
even.
been a piece of shit since Holes.
I was going to say, I don't even really remember at this point, kind of like Lindsay Lohan, the era in which we were just like, here it is, a normal celebrity. Like, I don't, like, that was so short-lived. You know, he
Eagle Eye and Disturbia.
No, right. Disturbia would have been the last glimpse of it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he was ripping off Hitchcock then, so we still have a reason to be mad.
We'll get into the lawsuit and everything, but I do want to say that it is interesting talking about Shia in this way now, because I agree, it is weird to even think about the period when he was a normal celebrity. And I think what's also aided the fact that we've known him to be sort of like violent and volatile is the fact that he leaned heavy into just being this weird, memey Andy Kaufman sort of character, you know? Like, I specifically think about like the time that he watched all his movies while he was being filmed watching them, you know? And even recently, during quarantine, when he did the Fast Times at Ridgemont High read with Brad Pitt and Jen and whoever else was in it. I didn't watch it. But it's moments like that, right, that sort of have kept him as a comic figure, and we sort of ignore or forget about the darker aspects of his celebrity that are usually always in the news. I mean, it's why when we saw the fucking Paris Hilton documentary, right, we forget that, like, she said nigga. You know, and we should really just hate her for being racist, but all we remember is That's Hot and her Scott Storch album.
I want to say how ashamed I am of not assuming that celebrities get better because they are productive, but realizing that productivity doesn't mean you're not a piece of shit. Like when Honey Boy came out last year, it reminded me of, well, now after this recent story, it's like when Whitney had the $1 Million Bill song and era. I was like, oh, good, we're on the up and up. No, what? Like, other people work on this stuff and make it good and make it, like, nothing about successfully putting out artistic material means you are quote unquote better or in the clear or whatever.
Yeah.
And I do think there's something that tricks my lizard brain into thinking that sometimes.
I feel the same way about that, Louis. I would also add that once they start making art again, I'm like, oh, you're back. You're doing well. Mm-hmm. But when they also make the exact type of apologetic art that they needed to make, like that was necessary for them to even be able to continue in Hollywood, it's all a lot of trickery. It's all a lot of smoke and mirrors that traumatizes us into being like, oh, you're dealing with it. You made a movie with a woman director, like you, Honey Boy. It's right there. Like you're dealing with your trauma. So I feel bad that I believed him, but I also understand this is kind of how men in Hollywood are now going to leverage the apology and like leverage the salvation that they can try and get because they know that we're going to be gullible in that way, that we're going to want to believe them. So we might believe them. So don't blame yourself is what I'm saying. Because I'm not doing it.
He is the rare case of, let's say, you know, we make him go away. There truly is this other Shia LaBeouf we have properly nurtured over the years. And I have no problem giving everything we were going to give him to Miles Teller. Okay, great. Moving right along.
Y'all know I love Miles.
He is the better one. Ooh, I
Rabbit
love
Hole, Whiplash, right down the line. I love almost everything he does. He was
Even
amazing
War
in the
Dogs.
Footloose remake. Yes.
I don't maybe get that inclination that you had brought up, Louis. I mean, just because I know that as artists like ourselves, right? Like, I've maybe been some of the most mentally fucked up when I've been working productively. I feel like that's a way that you sort of get away with it. That's when you should be going to therapy, because writing is your therapy, right? And for him, he has always used this sort of like red table talk speak, in a way of like, oh, I'm acknowledging what I did was wrong, but also like sort of like glossing over it in this like speak that sounds like he's just been sitting at Barnes & Noble reading, like the self-help section and like listening to Brene Brown and like, how do I phrase this? Saying things like, I'm not in any position to tell anyone how my behavior made them feel. I have no excuses for my alcoholism or aggression, only rationalizations. I have been abusive to myself and everyone around me for years. I have a history of hurting the people close to me. I'm ashamed of that history and I'm sorry to those I hurt. There is nothing else I can really say. But then also says many of the allegations are not true, but he owes the women the opportunity to air their statements publicly and accept accountability for those things that I have done. So he's simultaneously
Which
saying,
is it, nigga?
I'm trash, and also saying, also they lying.
Yeah, that's not the time to do that. I also don't like that in the apology he included that he's been abusive to himself. Like, maybe I'm being a little too granular about the apology, but this is not a time to talk about how you're affecting yourself when clearly there are so many palpable, awful things you've done to the women around you. Like, it just feels like a cop-out.
Right.
I agree. It's like a version of I'm not a perfect person, which is my number one thing I hate.
Were you abusive to yourself in the way that Carolyn Foe, a stylist who was a former girlfriend of yours, described to the New York Times that you pinned her to a bed and headbutted her enough that she bled, and not even getting into the stuff from Twigs, who talks about how he had threatened to crash their car after Valentine's Day in 2019 unless she professed her love for him, talks about how he would wake her up in the middle of the night choking her, talks about how he gave her a sexually transmitted disease, accused him of relentless abuse, and said that she wanted to be able to raise awareness on the tactics that abusers use to control you and take away your agency. And talks about how she didn't go to the police, first out of a misguided concern about harming his career, and later because she thought her account would not be taken seriously and it would be futile. And I mean, doesn't this exactly sound like the Meghan incident from earlier this year, or even the Rihanna and Chris Brown incident? It is women worried about damaging the career of a man who is a fellow artist.
Yeah, this is like a really awful and interesting predicament to be in, one that I've been in myself, where that speaking out about the situation not only puts that person in danger, and you don't want to be the person who does that, and also it puts you in danger. And some of FKA Twigs' stories she talks about abuse that happened in 2018, and that is when they were shooting Honey Boy. We know FKA Twigs was in that movie. So now she's in that perfect storm of danger of I'm working with this man. This movie's about to come out. I'm going to have to do a press tour with him afterward. We're going to have to be around each other all the time. And that's when like the self-manipulation and the self-convincing that you shouldn't speak about it. And FKA Twigs said that it was easier for her to just deal with the abuse than it was to talk about it or tell anybody. The idea of going home and going to London and dealing with what was going on, she knew it was the right thing to do, but was far too scary to actually get on that flight and go home and deal with the wrath of Shia.
Also, I just want to say that every one of these revelations is, like, as I'm reading them, more painful than the last. If she had literally come out with one of these things, it would be traumatizing enough, I imagine. But to get this whole story is just honestly super difficult to bear. This is a super difficult conversation because the behavior is so unbelievably disgusting.
What was wild, too, was that truly as my friends and I were sitting and talking about Shia after the news came out, we discussed moments in pop culture that he's a part of that, would you even be sad if they were gone? And largely, no. And then we thought about how great that Sia video that he's in. Then truly, it felt like minutes later, Sia tweeted as well that she had been in a relationship with Shia. and said that I too have been hurt emotionally by Shia, a pathological liar who conned me into an adulterous relationship, claiming to be single. I believe he's very sick and have compassion for him and his victims. Just know if you love yourself, stay safe, stay away. She followed up with a message saying, I love you, FKA Twigs. This is very courageous, and I'm very proud of you. Could have done without the I have compassion for him in the first sentence that you ever write, but, you know, who am I to talk about how she's dealing with her own grief, you know?
There's this funny pattern I'm noticing now where, like, all of Shia LaBeouf's victims and survivors of him are women that he met on set and had to work with him. And I think that this Sia situation that you're talking about, the music video and Sia's story, all coincide with recording that video while he was dating Mia Goth at the time, who he met on the set of Nymphomaniac. Like, there's just this constant, you don't meet Shia in the real world and stay. You just have to, it's like a proximity thing, it seems like. And then that's when he finds a way to, look at me trying to be a therapist, but, you know, I think that's how he kind of wields his weaponry against women. It's disgusting.
Well, you work with him, and then you sort of experience this talent, you know, on set and in rehearsals or what have you, and then you're sort of drawn to that. I mean, I've seen that in past relationships, people who just sort of seem very like enigmatic or just have this sort of like pull to you, and you see talent or what feels like talent, you know, and like they're so mesmerizing, and that's why you get pulled into a relationship like that. And then later you realize it was all smoke and mirrors, because of course it is, because they're an actor.
Yeah.
I hope we are not getting immune in general to how hard this is for people to bring into words. Like, when I think of like Evan Rachel Wood years ago talking about Marilyn Manson, I mean, like, that's like, as much as that was incredibly painful to hear, like, things like this are like monumental celebrity moments in that once upon a time we just did not allow that kind of candor, really. Like, what kind of position would we have put people like that in where they could be honest? And like, I'll say nowadays maybe it's likelier that they can be, but still it's like, I don't take for granted how extraordinary something like this is, and how unbelievable, like, they're adding, like, these women are adding something to their legacies now that is so tough and so but necessary for their survival, and that's just so wild as a bystander to comprehend.
And it just goes to the resilience too of these women, because, you know, like, Twigs is one of my favorite artists working right now. You know, we literally just saw her performing at Dua Lipa's Studio 2054. I saw her in concert at the end of last year, and it was one of the most riveting, you know, like, emotional experiences I've had at a concert. And it's just so hard to think about an artist that you love, who's given you so much, going through something so painful while they were trying to create this art, you know? And like, even knowing that he was fucking with her art too, you know, like, fuck him.
Yeah.
Truly, fuck Shia LaBeouf.